Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We'll be doing some broad overview and introductions to the project and the project team. And so I'm sure a few more people will trickle in before we really dive into the meat of things here. So this is a teleconference for the OpenITI project, and we're going to talk about a few of the projects that we have going right now. The Open Islamicate, the OpenITI or Open Islamicate Text Initiative is a multi-institutional initiative that brings together researchers working on Arabic and Persian initially, and now increasingly on Urdu and Ottoman Turkish as well. And we're very excited to really start to work on those. We'll talk a little bit about that direction that our work is heading. And we're very interested in working on other potential languages as well. We can maybe talk about potential collaborations on that in the breakout rooms we'll do at the end. The Open Islamicate Text Initiative, and John, if you could go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, here's a little agenda. We'll start off by doing some kind of broad introductions, and then we'll talk through the first project, which is the OpenITI AOCP, or Arabic Script OCR Catalyst Project, then the Kitab project. And we'll talk a little bit then after that about some of the future directions that the OpenITI project is heading in, including a few newly funded or potentially, hopefully soon to be funded projects. And then we'll have ample time for questions and end with some breakout rooms in which we want to get you in the conversation on this, because one of the main goals of this teleconference is to actually find out what kind of things you're working on, find out what kind of, as they would call them, use cases you have, whether you're an individual researcher or you're here as a person representing an institution or a larger project. We want to hear the kind of things you're working on and talk about potential for collaborations. So we'll wrap up with that, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to do in the breakout rooms when we get to the end. John, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so before we start, I would be remiss if I didn't foreground and say from the beginning that we're very grateful for the funding we've received to make these projects happen. So as we go through, we'll talk a little bit about which projects are funded by which group, but as a whole, we've received very generous funding from the Mellon Foundation, the National Endowment for Humanities, and the European Research Council. So this has all been made possible by them, as well as our institution's investment in us as well. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so these projects, in particular, digital humanities projects, are typically highly interdisciplinary. They're highly interdisciplinary, and they're also highly collaborative. And so this group here and the research and the projects that we're going to be presenting are certainly by no means the work of just myself or Sarah or Maxime, who have been the principal investigators on these projects. These are large team projects that involved the expertise and the labor of many people at all of our institutions, and people who are not even at our institutions. So I won't go through and introduce everybody here, but we want to make that something that we are very open and transparent about, that these things are group efforts. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the Open Islamicate Text Initiative, or OpenITI as I'll refer to it from here on out, began in 2016, and it really came out of a conversation that Sarah Savant, Maxime Romanov, and I had on the sidelines actually at a dinner at this DH week that Gregory Crane hosted and invited us all to when he was in Leipzig. The one thing I want to say is that Maxime often jokes that Gregory Crane is one of the founding fathers of Islamic digital humanities, and the reason is because he was so instrumental in bringing us all together in the beginning, and also actually really supporting us in the early phases before we were able to get our own funding before we even knew fully exactly what we wanted to do. He was helping kind of coach us through these things and encourage us to keep this going. So when we started out, we set out 3 broad goals, and you'll see as we talk through the different projects and the different things that we're doing today, how these have been developed out. So the first thing was obviously we needed to improve OCR for Persian and Arabic. So this is something that without good OCR, we knew from the very beginning that it was going to be extremely difficult to build corpora for Persian and Arabic. There were obviously some existing ones that we've made uses of, but they had a range of problems and also were rather limited by genre and time period. And so we set out from the beginning to work on OCR, and you'll see a lot of that in this presentation today. We also wanted to work on building digital text encoding standards for Persian and Arabic. So what makes digital text useful, at least in part for many uses, is actually how they're encoded and whether they can be used in a machine actionable format. And so this is another really key piece that actually the Kitab team has been working on tremendously, and we'll talk a little bit about today. The last was this broad idea of building digital infrastructure. And the form that this has taken for us that we'll talk about is actually building an open source and user-friendly digital text production pipeline so that users who do not have technical expertise are able to take advantage of the OCR work that we're doing. We all at that time, except perhaps for Maxime, who had a much more advanced digital and technological skills than us at that point. It was very difficult to get into this because we were not able to use some of the OCR tools and other kind of tools that needed to be used from the command line. We needed significant technological help to get these things going. And so this is our goal from the beginning, was to help overcome this so that individual researchers, graduate students, undergrads, even just people who are interested throughout the world who want to OCR text and put them into international text encoding standards could do so really with the ease of how you would do almost something like online banking. So we started out with this, and now let's, John, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so there was really 2 projects that started in the very beginning. It was the OpenITI AOCP project and the Kitab project. We're going to talk about the Kitab project in a few minutes, but I want to talk through what we have been doing in the OpenITI AOCP project. And I won't in this presentation focus too much on the technical details, because we did a teleconference about a month and a half ago with the technical side, the computer science side of this team, in which we talked through the actual kind of technical development work. So if you're interested in that, I'll ask John, perhaps, or Jonathan, if you could put the link to that. It's up on YouTube. Put that in the chat just so people can reference that. But I'm going to talk about what the technical development work that we've been doing and how that's going to impact your ability to produce text. So the AOCP project goal was, as I said before, was to build a user-friendly open source digital text production pipeline, improve Persian and Arabic OCR by taking these kind of latest advancements in NLP and computer vision and integrating them into a pipeline. And as I emphasize here, a user-friendly pipeline that can actually be employed by people that don't have computer scientists or digital librarians on their team to help them run this. We also are running a corpus pilot. So we, as we'll talk about in a minute, we've gotten OCR accuracy rates up to levels at which we believe that we can move forward in actually starting to produce text at a large scale. And so we will in the future be scaling this up quite a bit, but in this project, we wanted to do an initial collection of about 200 works, approximately 100 Persian, 100 Arabic, that would let us see the full process. So the full process all the way from scanning to uploading, OCRing, and then exporting them into digital text formats that are useful for researchers to do computational textual analysis, and also to be displayed in online environments. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is perhaps the point that people have asked us about the most. So the main thrust of this AOCP project was to improve OCR accuracy rates. So I'm sure I don't have to tell any of you who are here today and are interested in this. When we started this work back in 2018 and 2019, it was kind of that academic year, the best out of the box typical OCR rates you would get on text in the wild. So I'm not saying kind of text done on OCR under ideal conditions, but text in the wild. And what we mean by that is text that you can pull off of archive.org, text that you made, scans that you made as a graduate student or something like that, that you can just pull in from anywhere and OCR them. Those accuracy rates at that time when we started were typically in the mid 70% accuracy to at most low 80s. On some typefaces, if they were quote unquote born digital typefaces, the Google OCR engine could get pretty good accuracy rates, but their range was rather limited to typefaces that had born digital typefaces. And so what we set out to do was say, okay, we're going to actually focus on the typefaces in which the works that we all work on, those of us who are working on primarily pre-modern Islamicate studies, we're going to do a survey of these works. And we're going to identify what typefaces are most common, and then B, work on producing training data to make sure that we are able to achieve high levels of accuracy on those. So when David Smith, the computer scientist who's the co-PI on this project, when they ran initial tests on the works that we gave them in the very beginning of this project, they ran it with Tesseract, and they were getting baseline accuracy rates in the low 80s, which were actually a little bit higher than the ones that El Ghamdi and Tihan had found in their study in 2017. So we set out, we said, look, what we need in order to have texts that are usable and that are a good base to start from, we want to make sure our accuracy rates are an aggregate average of over 97% accurate. So you can see on this table here, these are the accuracy rates that we've been continuously testing, and these are probably from about a month or two ago. And these are the typefaces that we have identified as the most common, but even these, as you start to get to some of them, like, for example, the Persian incunabula, or there's another Arabic Euro typeface that we'll look at in just a second. These are typefaces that are not as common. Nevertheless, we've been working on them. And if you look, John, can you, for some reason, the aggregate total at the bottom is getting cut off on this slide. I don't know if it's just on my screen. Maybe just move it up a little bit, the table in the slide. Not sure why it's getting cut off, but in any case, as you see, right now we're at about 97.2 aggregate accuracy across these typefaces. We're not done yet. We're going to talk about in a little bit some of the things that we're still working on. We anticipate actually that these numbers will probably creep up into the high 97s or even low 98 character accuracy rates by the time we finish this project in late summer. But this gives you a sense of where we're at. This marks a really important advance in Arabic script OCR, because the Kitab team will actually talk a little bit in a minute. These accuracy rates give us texts that are highly usable for many forms of computational textual analysis, not to mention things like search or using to create bases for digital publications. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we thought it would be good to give you just a very specific sense of what this looks like. So Lawrence from the Kitab team kindly prepared this. So if you look on your left at the image of a scan of this book, this typeface, and Jonathan Allen is our typeface expert on the team. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the Euro-Arabic typeface. Is that correct? Yeah, I see Jonathan. So this is not a really common typeface, but it's important. And it also is one of the more difficult ones. And what we thought we would do is illustrate for you what the difference is between 2019, when we started, and where we're at now. So if you look at the middle image, this is this page scan ran through Tesseract, the 4.11 version from 2019. And this one all the way on the right is with our latest model from December, run through eScriptorium, which is the digital text production pipeline that we'll be showing you in a little bit. You can count the differences if you want. I think it's about 42 character errors on the Tesseract, and it's believe about 11 on this new one. If you want to break this down even finer, John, can you go to the next slide? Oops, I think we're missing a slide here. John, can you go back to looking for the slide that breaks it down by character? Can you go to the next one? Maybe we switch the order.
Matt, I think, hang on, I think I can fix.
There we go.
You got it.
So why is it skipping over that? Okay. All right. Okay, so just to break these numbers down a little bit, if you have a character accuracy rate, that's what the abbreviation CAR is for, of 97%. 3% of all the characters, assuming this, 3% of the characters on a page would contain errors. So a typical page contains something like 1,394 characters, 265 word tokens. A 3% error rate, or a 97% accuracy rate, would mean that approximately 42 characters contain errors on a page. Actually, that page that we just saw probably was better than this, actually. And that approximately 15% of word tokens may contain a character error within them. So what does this mean? This is not a problem at all. A 3% error rate is not a problem at all for something like a text reuse algorithm. It is problematic for other types of approaches, which is why we're not going to rest on our laurels and stop with a 97% accuracy rate. We want to keep getting it up. But this gives you some sense of where we're at and what these texts that we're producing can be used for, and what we still need to do in order to improve them. So next slide, please. So, okay, so on our OCR work, there's a few things that we're going to be working on and wrapping up in the next few months as we head to the kind of end of this project, the first phase, by the end of the summer. We're working on improving character accuracy rates for vocalized text. So this has been something that we've been experimenting with. And we've tried a few different approaches, and we think we might have one that is proved promising, but high vocalization has at times proved problematic in worsening accuracy, basically. The other really promising thing that we're working on, and that we actually anticipate will give us a boost in accuracy, this is partially what we're hoping will put us up in the high 97 or even maybe low 98 aggregate average for character accuracy rate, is incorporating a language model into the correction phase, or into the modeling phase, to help it more accurately guess which word would be which character would be the most accurate transcription of the scan. And then something that will help users who are looking at these results allowing in eScriptorium users to see the confidence measures for the line and the page and the text. So one of the things we want to be very open about, and we'll talk about, we have already, and we'll talk about a little bit later, is that we're not going to promise you that you're going to get perfect results all the time. What we do want to do is make sure that you know what kind of results you have gotten and what those can be used for. And so part of that is what we're incorporating in eScriptorium right now is actually a confidence measure estimation that will allow you, after you go OCR to text, to look through the document quickly, zoom into areas of high and low accuracy, and determine, is this usable for your purposes, basically. Okay, so next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Allen, who is the postdoc on our project here at University of Maryland on the AOCP project. And he's going to talk a little bit about eScriptorium, the digital text production pipeline, and also the pilot corpus project that we have been running because he's really been leading these two things on our team. So Jonathan, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So I'm not going to go into great detail on the kind of inner workings of eScriptorium, just give you a bit of an introduction now. Later, when we go to the breakout rooms, we'll have a chance to actually explore the platform to see kind of how it works. What I will say is that eScriptorium has kind of served two purposes for us. One, it is the eventually public-facing pipeline that we want to use for the wider public to generate corpora in Arabic and Persian and other Arabic script languages. We've also been using it as our main platform for generating training data. So we've been using this for, I guess, like 2 years now? Lose track of time. We had a platform previously called Corpus Builder. It seems like years ago, it wasn't that long ago, that didn't really quite prove satisfactory. And so we've been using this platform, which was developed by others, and which is continuing in a continuous state of development among various parties involved in it. We've refined it. I'd say we, speaking very broadly, based on our own sort of experience using Arabic script on this platform. And we're getting to a point where it is becoming more user-friendly and better adapted for Arabic script. But we've been using it to refine our OCR models as well as our segmentation and layout models for Arabic script, which we've now been testing in a number of ways. Matt mentioned that we've done the pilot corpus project as a way of testing our OCR models and really kind of seeing what happens when you plug in texts, printed text from a wide range of sources and from a lot of different genres and different periods. So we compiled a list of text in both Arabic and Persian, drawn from lots of different genres, and trying to identify important text within these genres to add them to this corpus. And then what we did was sort of a combination of finding PDFs online, so through all of the sort of usual sources. And for things that we couldn't locate online, we secured physical copies of the books. And then we went through the entire process of creating a corpus, scanning the books after acquiring them, turning them into PDF format, uploading them to eScriptorium, and then running through the various processes of segmentation and transcription. After doing that, we've done checks within each of these works to get a sense for what the actual accuracy is. So we have this aggregate accuracy of 97.2% or whatever it is. What we've been doing is going through each of these works within this pilot corpus and manually counting how many errors appear. And getting an idea for what accuracy really looks like in the wild with these texts. And these are a very broad range of text. Some of them are very recent publications. Others that we've included in the corpora were published in the 19th century. So going back all the way to the beginnings of Arabic script print. And we have them from lots of different publishers and printers and a wide range of typefaces. On the whole, we've been really pleasantly surprised, actually. And in many cases, in many of the texts that we've added to the corpus, our accuracy rates, based on our kind of spot checks, are in the 98 to 99% range, which has been really exciting. We've also been able to identify places where there are real problems. And some of these are not necessarily related to our OCR model, but they're problems of just print quality. There's some layout issues that have arisen, things like that. But in general, we found that both the OCR models that we've generated are working very well, and that the workflow using eScriptorium is, as you know, there have been some hiccups and some problems along the way, but in general has done really well, relatively smooth and relatively fast in most cases. So I think that's probably enough on eScriptorium. So we'll be looking at the platform a little bit later on when we go into the breakout rooms to get a sense of kind of how it works. But in general, I will say, because I've been using this for a couple of years now, that it has become more user-friendly over time as we've sort of refined it in collaboration with others.
And I'm sure Jonathan will address this when he does the kind of demo of eScriptorium in the breakout room. But we are actually in the process right now of doing a design overhaul of it. So what you see now was the kind of initial version of it. And we've brought a design consultant on board, and we'll be doing some pretty substantial redesign on the interface to make it even more user-friendly.
But the bones, if you will, are working very well. And I mean, we're still in a state of refinement. So Matt mentioned the OCR refinement, which will continue. We're also working on improving things like layout analysis, so identifying the regions within the text, as well as issues with segmentation. Oh, okay. Well, I forgot this was the next slide. So Matt, did you want to talk about this, or do you want me to?
No, I mean, we're already running behind, so we don't have to belabor the point, but I do want to point this out as something that, because this was one of the main technical things that we set out to work on in this project, was how to deal with complex layouts. And so we've been working on this. And as you can see here, it does work quite well. And you're able within eScriptorium to define text regions, which will allow you then to do things like export only certain text regions. So if you're only interested in the main text and you want to strip footnotes, for example, you are able to do that. Okay, I will turn it over now. The Kitab team is going to talk a little bit about their work. And for that, I will turn it over to Sarah Savant.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So the Kitab project is, well, it's really part of the OpenITI, or it's like a Venn diagram in which they overlap very closely, because all of the work that we're doing, and we're funded by the European Research Council. We've also received funding from the Qatar National Library and from the Aga Khan University. All of our works go into the OpenITI. So we're publishing, we're putting OCR outputs that the team is working on into releases that we do twice a year at least through Zenodo. So they can be obtained open access. You can download them now if you like. And we're also making all of these texts available on GitHub and through our application, which you can search and find texts. So a lot of the work that is being done collaboratively through the OpenITI, and specifically with the generous funding of Mellon, then is used within the Kitab project. So part of what we're doing is corpus building, but the kind of methods development that we do in Kitab is very much about history of books, working on the history of books. So we're interested in questions about the reuse of text, so how you can see passages, common passages and alignments of texts across time. We have 1.5 million files at last count, I think, representing alignments between any two books. We have in the corpus as a whole 2 billion words, so it's a lot of alignments, a lot of files. But we're trying to make all of this data that shows you the transmission and really the historical memory of the written tradition over a very long period of time and geography. So text reuse detection is one of our main missions, and that's what the ERC grant really is about. But as part of this, we also look at citations. So I see Ryan Muther is here on the call. So we've been working with David Smith and Ryan on tracing isnads and tracing citations of texts of various types besides isnads. And part of that also, of course, is then to work on who's getting cited in texts. And one of our team members, Masumi Saidi, is also interested, and with Maxime in, for example, geography and place names. So there's a lot of kind of methods development that's going on within the team. And we'll be starting a center at the Aga Khan University this year, inshallah, in which we'll be continuing this work into the foreseeable future. So if you're at all interested in the work we do, I see Peter, I think, has kindly posted, a link. Do get in touch, and we're happy, to speak with you. Can you do the next slide, Jonathan? Thank you. And so just to kind of put this issue of corpus, part of the reason we discussed having Kitab speak here is that, in a way, you may be wondering, well, why OCR? What does it matter? What can be done with it? And we wanted to represent ourselves as, albeit a very, let's say, part of the leadership, but also part of a user, of OCR. So we think of the work we do as a project is broken into these three areas. And corpus, which is where the OCR work sits, is the first area. We create, curate, release through Zenodo, GitHub. And we do a lot of annotation for structure, of works. I'm not sure what the last count was, but it's over 1,000 works that we've done in the context of the ERC. We also then work on these methods, so text reuse detection using the PASM algorithm with David Smith, and then ISNADs, etc. And then we also are very interested in issues of making the work that we're doing available. So the team is working at the moment on an application, an API, application programming interface, and really very much hopes within the next couple of years to secure a little bit more funding to make all of the data available and usable, for example, by libraries, which we think would benefit enormously by having access to corpora and also things like text reuse data, named entity recognition data. Next slide, please. So Peter, yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit about why we are using OCR in our work at Kitab. So the main reason we are using it is to plug gaps in the corpus we're working with. So as you can imagine, so we have about 6,000 texts in the corpus now, different books. That's only a minute fraction of the written tradition, of course, only part of which survived as in manuscript format, and only a very small part of those manuscripts were printed and then digitized by other parties. And so as contributors to the OpenITI corpus, we try to harvest as many of these digitized texts that are floating around on the internet and putting them in a specific format that's easily used. So we put these together in the corpus. The problem with this, of course, is that we also inherit all the biases of these, all the steps in between, right? Because all of these steps from manuscript to print to digitization involve choices made by copyists, by editors, by people who run these digital projects. Can you go to the next slide, please, John? So it's impossible for this corpus to be representative of the entire tradition, but at least what we can try to do is identify clear gaps in what the corpus covers and what doesn't. And we do this by comparing the corpus to bibliographical works, to catalogs of manuscript collections, for example. In this example, you see a graph that shows you a comparison between Ibn Nadim's Fihrist, it's a bibliographical work, and all the texts in the OpenITI corpus before 400 AH, and you can see clearly that hadith is extremely overrepresented in the OpenITI corpus for this period in comparison to Ibn Nadim's work. And on the other hand, like of the folk literature, non-Muslim literature and alchemy, for example, almost nothing of that it made it into the corpus. So this kind of text that we will focus on to get these into the corpus. Yeah, next slide, please. I think that's Matthew.
Yeah, so I'll just speak very briefly now. So Peter has spoken about plugging gaps in the OpenITI corpus, and so I just thought it'd be nice to present a little example of how this is useful to us as team members working on our own specific research projects. So I wrote my PhD on the subject of Egyptian historiography, primarily Fatimid historiography, and I was interested in the question of how al-Makrizi, what sources al-Makrizi uses and where you can find them. Sometimes they're excellent, sometimes they're not. And when I started my PhD, if I was starting now, for example, the first step I would have done is to go to eScriptorium and digitize all of the texts that were not digitally available, of which there are a large number that were useful to my particular research project. And so what I've done here to continue that work now is digitized some Egyptian texts that make heavy use of Fatimid source material and which are highly reused by authors like al-Makrizi, especially al-Makrizi. And then using those OCRs, we can that OCR output, we can leverage text reuse methods and truly understand how one author is reusing earlier works of history. So in this case, I've given you an example from Ibn Miyassar, History of Egypt, a text that doesn't survive, but which survives in a notebook made by Makrizi, and which Makrizi uses heavily in his Chronicle of the Fatimids, the Itiaz. And so on the top of the reuse graph that you can see here, so if you imagine this reuse graph as a kind of scroll where each red bar represents some text that has been reused, and so on the top set of scrolls on that graph you have Ibn Miyassar's text, and on the bottom scroll you have al-Makrizi's text, and the yellow lines show the reuse between these texts, so where parts of Ibn Miyassar's text is being reused by al-Makrizi. And so you can see here already that he reuses that text throughout the Itiaz, but in particular al-Makrizi is reusing heavy sections from Ibn Miyassar's text near the end of the chronicle, around the reign of al-Mustansir in particular. And the reason I pull this example up for you today is because actually Ibn Miyassar's reuse by al-Makrizi is something that's quite well known by my field. It's something that's been studied fairly well, although we don't know exactly where the reuse is happening in some cases. And so this allows us a way of seeing how the OCR is performing as well, I think. And what's really powerful here is that Passim has found with this OCR text, which is a fairly good quality, as we spoke about character accuracy rates earlier, that's enough to get good text reuse outputs. And on the right side, for an example, you can see a difference between the text from Ibn Miyassar and al-Makrizi side by side, where blue shows additions by Ibn Miyassar and green shows additions by al-Makrizi, and yellow means words that have been rearranged. And you can see clearly here that even though there are small errors in the OCR, so I've put a red box around the top, the wow and the ta, that's just an example of where some marginal material has been mistranscribed by the model. And that's not affected the text reuse in any way. It's not stopped the text reuse being detected. It doesn't make the output in any way unusable for us doing research in text. So this is really exciting from my point of view. It's allowing me to study these texts in ways that I couldn't do before. Sorry, next slide, I guess, Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew. So as has been outlined by Peter and Matthew, based on research, we try to fill gaps in our corpus and balance it better. And what we need, so in order to achieve this relatively fast, we need OCR. And at Kitab, we make use of the OpenITI OCR models in two different ways. So we use the models outside of eScriptorium and inside of eScriptorium. So the goal is OCR large numbers of texts with minimal human input. So and this is what we try to achieve through our OCR pipeline, which we run on the Kitab server. So which basically consists of, so you can upload PDFs via Dropbox to our pipeline, which will be automatically triggered. The images will be extracted from the PDF. These images will be segmented and transcribed through Kraken, and we will have sort of outputs, text file output in the Markdown format, and page XML files as well. So we achieved to OCR about 200 plus texts over the past months through this pipeline. And so this would be the one side, so outside of eScriptorium. And then eScriptorium, what do we use it for? We use it for like more complex page layouts. I mean, Jonathan has shown that before, where you saw like the one image with the main text and then sort of the margins around, or some commentary or so. So which would not work in the normal sort of through our normal pipeline, because the OCR engine would sort of read across the boundaries. And we also use eScriptorium for post correction. So if you have 1 or 2 or 3 texts which we want to take care of more carefully, so we would sort of use eScriptorium, and which with the added sort of advantage that we can use those post-corrected texts for sort of as further training data. So I think that's pretty much all I have to contribute. Thank you.
Okay, so what I want to finish this overview presentation with is just outlining some of our future directions. So what we've been talking about here has been what we've taken to call in the phase 1 OpenITI AOCP project. And we are busy at work planning a phase 2, and we have several grant proposals that are in process that we're hopeful about, but we don't know for certain until you know. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about the directions that we're heading. So what we're planning to do in the second phase is, now that we have OCR models that can reliably produce highly accurate transcriptions, we want to take what we did in this kind of 200 work size pilot corpus and scale this up to about 2,500 new Persian and Arabic works. This would be something we probably do over the next 3 years approximately. And we would very much welcome your input on what works to do, because ultimately what we want to be doing is we want to be producing texts that are of use to researchers and teams of researchers and students in the field. So please do let us know if you have suggestions. And we will pass around a form at the end in which you can sign up and get in touch with us. So the second thing that we're going to be doing that we're very excited about is expanding the OCR functionality into Ottoman Turkish, and that should also say Urdu, but Urdu is not there for some reason. We've actually already started experimenting on both, and we've gotten some fairly good results already, but we need to significantly scale up the amount of work that we would do on the training data in those traditions in order to get it up to the same levels of accuracy that we have achieved with Persian and Arabic. The next really big thing that we're expanding into is HTR, handwritten text recognition. So what we have focused on in phase 1 is OCR, optical character recognition, which is what you use for the automatic transcription of print texts. What we are excited about moving into is HTR. We want to actually begin to work on Persian and Arabic manuscripts and doing automatic transcription of manuscripts. I'm going to talk a little bit in a second about specifically what we're doing on those and how we're adapting our approach to meet the much higher degree of complexity that we see there. The last thing I'll just say in terms of future directions is that in the first phase, we have been, I think, very, perhaps to our detriment, inward focused, and we've been working on developing this technology. And what we really want to be doing beginning today and onwards in future phases is making sure that we are developing collaborations with institutions, with other large research project teams, and expanding out into some new areas. So as we start to work on manuscripts, one of the things that we've been piloting is actually doing digital publications of works that have no print intermediary. So works that we're taking from manuscript into digital publication without any intermediary in the print format. And we've been doing those in collaboration with Professor Carl Ernst on some Sufi text, on some a really interesting project on Omar ibn Said, who was a enslaved Islamic scholar in North Carolina, who wrote in Arabic in North Carolina, and actually with Carl Ernst's graduate students have actually taken these texts and encoded them into OpenITI Markdown, and they are now published online, actually. John, if you can find that link, that would be great to share in the chat. So we're working on how do we actually move into this arena of publishing texts, OpenITI not just as a corpus, but also as a place where people can digitally publish works as well. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the specific future direction. So our HTR work is focused right now on two sub-projects. The Automatic Collation for Diversifying Corpora, or the ACDC project, and the Textual Lacunae Reconstruction project. And both of these projects are pushing forward at a kind of cutting edge research level. So these are not projects that are probably ready for, these are projects that are still kind of research in progress, I would say. We've gotten some very good initial results and we're very excited about it. But basically what both of them are trying to do is say, okay, we have a new problem when we move to HTR. With OCR, we know that if we produce 1,000 lines or so of human produced training data on a particular typeface, that we can predictably get good transcription accuracy with it. Now, when you move to HTR, this becomes far more complicated because to some extent, every single manuscript, every single scribal hand can in a certain way be considered a different typeface, right? So we're never going to be able to produce via human produced training data, enough training data to make HTR transcription models that can regularly transcribe automatically the enormous manuscript tradition of Persian, Arabic, Urdu, Ottoman Turkish, the kind of whole Islamicate world. So what we need to do is we need to move into more unsupervised approaches to improving HTR transcription model accuracy. And both of these projects do this in different ways. I won't go into an enormous amount of detail on this because I said it's still an ongoing project. We have an NEH grant to work on the ACDC project, and we are in the middle of working on that. The Textual Lacunae Reconstruction project is, we've applied for some grants, and we're hopeful that at least one of them will come through to push this forward. But what they're both doing in different ways is trying to ease our reliance on human annotated data, ease our reliance on producing training data by experts to improve models. So what the ACDC approach is doing is it's actually reusing the PASM algorithm that David Smith developed that Sarah and the Kitab team are using to study Arabic book history. It's actually then repurposing this again to actually force alignments between dirty OCRs of text and existing digital transcriptions. And what I mean by this is this. We have a lot of works that we already have digital transcriptions of works for, whether in OpenITI corpus that we've drawn from Shamila or from Ganjur on the Persian side. We have these digital transcriptions. We also have a lot of different print editions of many of these works. What we want to do, and what we have been doing with good results, is saying, okay, we're going to take manuscripts of the Shahnameh, for example. We're going to OCR them with a regular OCR model, not an HTR model. The transcription results will be horrendous. You know, they'll be like 30% or something like that. And you may think, what in the world could you ever do with a 30% accurate transcription? Well, as it turns out, a lot. What using PASM in this ACDC tool, what we're able to do is actually force align lines from the digital transcription with the very poorly transcribed version. And what this creates is training data. In some of our early experiments, we were able to align 40 to 50% of lines, which is tremendous in that it allows us to get really solid training database much quicker. It's not perfect, and there's still issues that we're working on and figuring out and fine tuning. And by when I say we, I really mean David and his team at Northeastern University, and Ryan Muthler is here as well. One of his graduate students who's been working on this. But it's helping us significantly improve HTR transcription rates without having humans have to generate tons and tons of training data to do that. So the second project, the textual lacunae reconstruction project, is approaching this from a completely different angle. So it starts with the same problem, but it says, okay, how can we improve transcription models' accuracies without having to generate training data? Let's just see what happens when we feed raw images, raw scans of manuscripts, and we ask this tool that Taylor Kirkpatrick and his graduate student, Nikolai, have developed that actually uses a repurposed type of code from in-painting, from image recognition, to extract common image patterns and then create what's called a pre-training model. So this is a different type of model. It doesn't actually require human annotated data, but it extracts general features, which then can be fine-tuned. The model's parameters can be fine-tuned with a smaller amount of human data. So I'll just give you an example here. If you look at the left at this little table that I pulled out from a recent publication that we did. These are, and by the way, these are character error rates, not accuracy rates. Typically in computer science, they often present data as character error rather than accuracy rates. So if you look at these error rates, these error rates were produced with a pre-trained model, so a model that was trained without any human intervention, just feeding it raw scans and asking it to extract patterns, then fine-tuned on a small amount of data. So the table at the top represents what the error rates that were achieved on 30 lines, the bottom on 90 lines. And to give you a point of comparison, 30 or 90 lines is roughly 1 to 3 pages of data. Now, so what do we compare this to? If we compare this to the other earlier tests that have been done on Arabic manuscripts, these character error rates are, for the 90 lines, and even to some extent the 30 lines, are actually comparable or better than the accuracy rates that just a few years ago people were getting with 15 to 20 pages of human annotated training data. So this is a dramatic reduction in the amount of human annotated training data that's required to get these accuracy rates. The other really important thing to remember here is that this is being done with open source OCR software. So the other studies that were done a few years ago were done not only with 15 to 20 pages of human annotated data, but they were also the only engines that achieved near these levels of accuracy were Google's internal engine, which is proprietary and can't really be used for academic purposes, and another group, the RDI group out of Cairo University, that similarly is not open source, and so it's not really easy to use in the way that, for example, this Kraken OCR engine that we are working with and developing along with our partners at the eScriptorium project. This makes a huge difference. And so anyways, I won't go further into this right now. I'm happy to answer questions about it, but the point is that these initial tests are really promising for actually being able to see in the future, perhaps not next year or the next couple of years, but see a future in which we can get HTR accuracy rates that give us some really useful text. And I'll go ahead and let's go to the next page or the next slide here. And for some reason, we seem to have missed the thing we added, the why question. Sarah, I'm going to let you take that away. I don't know.
That's okay. Yes, I think, in reflecting on it, I think many of the people on this call probably know very well why it's very important to have HTR, good HTR. But just to summarize, maybe from our point of view, one of the ways we think about it on the Kitab project is that we might more or less eliminate the middleman of the print edition. We might be able to get better access to the witnesses to different texts over time, and sometimes extraordinarily different witnesses to what we think of as the same text or book. So from a book historian's point of view, getting, the quite technical, quite algorithmically sophisticated methods actually, we hope, bring us closer, to the original object of the book. So we're quite keen within the Kitab project to spend time and energy, to work on the HTR. We also think that, as Peter was saying, in terms of the context of what, this, we could call it survival bias, the limitations of what has passed through the various filters, that we get also, a greater diversity of genres, of texts, etc., regions. We can also find more texts, simply from what already exists, that's been digitized but not created into machine readable format. So there's lots of texts out there that we just don't know. We can also study their formats much better to understand some of, there's quite a bias towards, let's say, the single edition of a book, whereas the manuscript tradition would tell you a very different picture of, composite text, multi-text compilations, marginalia, etc. So we're very interested in these kind of other aspects to book history that we are hoping, especially when we see the much, you showed quite a clean and, consistent layout analysis, but there's even more complicated ones that have been successful, much to our surprise, in the work of this project already. So we can hope in the future for even better results on really some kind of difficult to read texts, including something like reading statements, etc. So lots of new research horizons, essentially, is what I'm saying, that I think will be opened up by the move. And how many years? I mean, how many years will it be before we can see one, version and machine actionable format of all texts that are now available online? I think it's less than 10. It could be even faster. So there's really a lot that's going to change for graduate students and for libraries, for researchers everywhere, in the next decade. So it's very exciting. It's really exciting work. The print is amazing. But the HTR is really a major frontier. So thank you.
So I'll just wrap up before we start questions. And just by saying that what we want to present here today, I know there's a lot of different details, sub-projects, different avenues that we've gone down in this presentation, but what we're trying to move towards is this broader ecosystem of text. So I think when people think of OpenITI, excuse me, they often think of the text that we're putting up on GitHub. But what we're moving towards in the future is actually a broader ecosystem that includes texts that are going to be made available for specific forms of computational research or modeling of the textual tradition. We're going to be doing more digital publications like the ones that we've done in collaboration with Carl Ernst and his graduate students. We're going to be doing collaborations with hopefully institutions, and we're working on some already, where we would be doing large scale HTR or OCR of collections, which we would incorporate into OpenITI, but also they would be able to make use of in order to accelerate and enhance search, discoverability, things like this. So we see OpenITI as not as a particular kind of isolated project, but is actually something that would be interfacing and collaborating with many other groups moving forward as we collectively try to move the textual tradition into the digital world in different ways. So I will end. We clearly did not budget or estimate our time well, but hopefully it was interesting. We want to do some questions, especially in case people have to leave. But we will also, after questions, if you're able to stick around, we'd like to do some breakout rooms, do some demonstration of eScriptorium, and also talk with those of you who may be interested in collaborating or learning more about specific points. So I'll stop here. Questions?
So we should probably take the slides down, right? We can see people. Yeah.
Yeah, and feel free to put them in the chat or to, raise your hand and speak up to whichever you're more comfortable with.
Everyone's dead silent.
I'd be very delighted if we just explained things so well.
It's either that or it's lunchtime.
Yeah.
Oh, it's true. It's
America.
noon.
Yeah.
It's noon in these, yeah.
One of the two.
Yeah. Indeed. Or later.
Well, if there's no questions that immediately come up, did anybody want to jump in? If not, we can move into the breakout rooms, and in some ways that may be an environment that's more conducive to questions. So last call on open question session, and if not, we can move into breakout rooms.
Which is where we offer to help you. So come to the breakout rooms if you want specific help from us. We're happy to help.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now. John, if you can create 2 breakout rooms, and what we have envisioned for this, and I realize that some people may kind of be overlapping with both of these groups, but if you can pick one that you think maybe more accurately characterizes your interest in the work here. The first breakout room will be for people who are individual researchers, students, or even librarians who are interested in OCRing particular text for, their project. The second breakout room, the idea is that it'll be more focused on people who are here representing larger institutions or larger projects that may want to collaborate at that kind of collection or institutional level with us. And in both, what we're interested in doing is understanding why you're here, what you're interested in, what your use cases are, what interests you in our work, and do you see your needs being met in what we've presented here? Or are there things that we have completely overlooked that you think if you were throwing your text at this would not work? I also want to mention that we will circulate a form for you to fill out if you're interested in being part of our user groups moving forward. So if you're interested in that, please do make sure you fill that out. I think we'll email it out to everybody in any case. But yeah, John, do you have the 2 breakout rooms ready?
I have made 2 breakout rooms, and theoretically, you all should be able to join them. I don't know, Peter, you're nodding your head. Can you see those options? So just to say,
Yes,
breakout room, again, is for individual researchers, and breakout 2 is for team researchers. I know those categories overlap some, but please select whichever you feel best represents your interest in coming to this conference.
All right, so we'll meet you in the breakout rooms, and we'll get started. Sorry, there we go. I just wanted to bring everybody back and say thank you for coming. Thank you for sticking with us over this, almost nearly 2-hour event here, and to be in touch. So we will circulate a form for you all to, give us some contact information. Let us know if you want to follow up about something specific. I don't know what happened in the other breakout room, but in ours, it seemed like there were several potential avenues for collaboration moving forward. But we would like to keep you updated on what we're doing moving forward as well, as things change and as new opportunities become available. And yeah, any concluding questions? Anything that was in the other breakout room that we can address here, or we can wrap up too if everybody's tired and wants to get lunch or dinner or breakfast, depending on which time zone you're in.
If you're in breakfast, I feel sorry for you for the last 2 hours. It's very early.
That's true. Yeah, we did this time because we in the previous teleconference, it was more focused on the the technological side, computer science side of this project, we had our team from University of California, San Diego, so they had to be on by 8 a.m. For that. So this 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time works well to try to get the widest range of people. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we'll be in touch, and please be in touch with us. Thank you for sticking with us here, and we will look forward to hearing from you.